Live, going live, going live. And everyone can see my thingamabobber again. And I'm live. Hello, pussies. Welcome back. Let me adjust this more. YouTube Live doesn't let you see the preview of like what your image looks like before you press play. So I'm so sorry, everybody. All right. Okay, now I'll start. Hey, pussies! Hello! Thank you for watching me adjust my camera. Welcome to the 10th video with me, Positive Pussy. I am so happy to be back here once again, giving all of you who watch some sex-positive sex information. In my first video, my ears. In my very first video, I said that the mission of this show was to help others with open-minded information about sex that's judgment-free and sex-positive and factual. And so I hope that that's what I've done for you guys so far. And to keep doing that, I will continue to answer sex questions. I will respond to comments, emails, tweets, whatever it is. And I will continue to do these videos every week. And hopefully they're on interesting topics that people will need and want to hear about. I also mentioned in my first video that I was going to this sexuality conference, but unfortunately I wasn't able to go and I had to cancel my registration. It's totally fine. I've been doing my own research and stuff on things, so keeping up with all that anyway. But I will still be applying to SFSI in the fall, and I'm really, really excited and nervous to apply because I know that it's really competitive. But I think that this is something that I really love and want to do. And as you guys know, I'm passionate about sex education and helping others have healthy sexual experiences and creating a more sex-positive world. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has watched my videos, provided feedback, and emailed me and subscribed. The support means so much to me, so thank you. These ears are really getting in my way. They're not attached. So yes, thank you, everyone. And if you haven't subscribed, my YouTube channel is Positive Pussy. My Twitter handle is @positivepuss with no Y. And my website is positivepussy.live, and it should also be in the description of this live video. So as always, I will upload this once I add links and resources that I mentioned, and there's resources for all of my previous videos, so check it out if you haven't already. But before we talk about this sensitive topic of consent, I want you to all know that I'm only covering the basics, and if you find yourself listening to this and you start thinking something may have happened to you without your consent, I will be mentioning resources for sexual assault survivors at the end. But at the very top, I'll just say there's a sexual assault hotline called, or it's a national, so no matter where you are, it's 1-800-656-HOPE, which the numbers stand for 4673. So it's 1-800-656-4673. And it's totally confidential. They talk you through your thoughts and they can help you decide what to do next. So I just wanted to mention that at the top, just in case. But so let's just talk about consent, shall we? Just to let you know, I'm going to be going into, oh my goodness, what consent is, what it is not, and what it looks like, and what it means when you don't have it. And I'll be talking about sexual acts. I might say the word rape, fuck, cock, pussy, or boobs. And if you're still down to watch this video, go ahead and say yes to yourself. If you're not down with this after all, turn this off right now. You won't hurt my feelings. I actually want you to. And if you said yes, but you later change your mind in the video, go ahead and turn it off then. No problem. Do you see what I did there? I got your consent. So let's talk about consent. Which is starting to become a more widely discussed topic, which is good, and it would be even better if it wasn't due to recent stories in the media about people like Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, Aziz Ansari even, and our even our goddamn president. But the good thing that can come from all of this is that we're talking about it, and movements like Me Too have gained popularity, and it brings to light just how important it is for everyone to know what affirmative consent means, and that performing sexual acts without this is sexual assault. So what consent means today is not what people have practiced in previous years. Even when I was in high school, I learned no means no. I learned how to keep myself safe from being assaulted. And no one ever told me not to assault anyone. And no one told me how to obtain consent before sexual acts. I was only told if you are in a sexual act and someone says no, then you stop. But the term affirmative consent is fairly new. It started gaining recognition in 2014 when the amazing governor of California, Governor Jerry Brown, signed the first law establishing a better standard of consent for colleges. It outlined consent as affirmative, conscious, voluntary, and revocable. Now, an estimated 1,400 institutions of like higher education, so colleges, use some type of affirmative consent in their sexual assault policies. And that's really great. It should be all of them. And I say should heavily there. It really should. But if you don't understand what affirmative consent means, that's okay. I'm going to go into what the affirmative consent specifically means in a second. But first, just the word consent by definition is the agreement to participate in a sexual act. It's kind of like a state, or I guess consent in a sexual term, in a sexual world, is the agreement to participate in a sexual act, but you can consent to anything. Consent is the state of being in agreement. It's not tangible unless you're writing up a contract that specifically states what the people consent to, and obviously in sex you're not going to do that, but that happens in some places, and businesses and stuff like that when parties consent to certain agreements. And if you're engaging in a sexual act with another human, you must have explicit indication that your partner is in that state of consent for the act that you're doing. And if that's hard to understand, then you can kind of think of the state of being in consent as the state of hunger. You can't see that someone is hungry by looking at them. That's their internal state. But they would have to share that with you. So they would have to say, hey, I'm hungry. I want to eat this burger. A person can show signs of being in the state of hunger, just like they can show signs of being in the state of consent. So for hunger, this would be like looking at food, talking about food. You might notice someone drooling, which would be funny. For consent, you might notice someone drooling, but you might be able to guess by like how they're looking at you or if they're being super flirtatious. But you don't know for sure that someone is hungry unless they say so. And you don't know for sure if someone is consenting unless they say so. The person can go into a restaurant, look at a menu, order food, and that doesn't mean that they're hungry. This doesn't mean that they want to eat the burger or the food that they ordered, or even will eat it once it comes. And the same goes for consent. You don't know if someone is consenting until they say so. So this is why verbal consent is always the best option. And I will stick with that one. Hopefully the food analogy wasn't too confusing, but if it was, I'm going to give a lot more examples of what affirmative consent looks like, so don't worry. So affirmative consent, it's still consent. It's just a little bit more defined. So it's the enthusiastic agreement to engage in a sexual act. Sounds a lot like regular consent, right? But affirmative consent has to be freely given. So it means that the person was not pressured, manipulated, or under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Affirmative consent can only be given after full disclosure of information. So the person knows what exactly they are consenting to. Do you want to have sex is a fine question, but asking about where, when, involving who, with or without a condom are all important things to mention. So a better question would be, do you want to leave this party with me and meet me in my bedroom in 1 hour and have some hot, dirty sex? If so, I'll bring the condoms. That includes so many different aspects of the sex and the act that's going to be happening. It's a longer sentence, but I think it sounds better. But anyway, otherwise, you know, if you have uninformed consent, someone could consent to having sex with a partner with a condom, and then the person doesn't actually wear a condom. So you're not fully informed of the kind of sex you consented to, which was protected sex, and you did not consent to unprotected sex. So affirmative consent is only given for one specific act at a time. If you ask them if they want to make out and they say yes, but once you start making out, you start touching their dick or their pussy, and your partner doesn't say that that's okay, then you don't have the consent to take making out further into that heavy petting. Even if you think that this is included in making out, or you think the other person is into it, you still need to get consent before escalating things further into new sexual acts, even if it's just from kissing to touching, or from touching to kissing, or whatever you started with. How hard is it to just be like, stop making out and say, I want to rub my hands all over your breasts, or like telling your partner, will you grab my dick? Like mid-makeout. That's super hot. And once your partner enthusiastically says, yes, or you may touch me, or hell yes, I want to grab the shit out of that, then you don't have the consent to do that. But if you're with someone who is willing, then most likely they will be saying those things. And it can be as simple as just asking, like, is this okay? Or asking your partner, will you touch my blank? Whatever it is. Another thing to remember is that affirmative consent can be terminated at any point in time for any reason. If you're making out, touching, licking, fucking, and one person wants to stop, suddenly or not, you stop. If you've already had sex with someone and you're trying to go in for round 2, just because they said yes one time doesn't mean they automatically say yes to this time. They can revoke consent at any time after saying yes. So just like the food example, if you order a burger and you stop eating it halfway through, you don't have to finish the burger. And hopefully no one is going to shove the burger down your throat. Obtaining consent from your partner is easy. It's literally just talking to them. But it's the talking about sex that is sometimes difficult for people, especially if you're new to intercourse and intimacy. So we don't really get a lot of practice or advice in regular life about this. So if you're someone who is afraid of talking about sex, I think the first thing to remember is that sexuality is normal, and it's normal to want to have sex and to be intimate with others, and it's normal to want to talk about it. So don't be ashamed if you do want to bring these things up to your partner. When talking about consent with a partner, start with yourself. Like, what do you want to do, try, or explore? Where are you willing to go, and what things to try? Remember, though, even if you get consent at the start of an act, it's something that you need to be aware of throughout the act. You have to continuously check in on your partner because this can be revoked at any time. So, make sure your partner's having fun. Honestly, I don't know why you wouldn't want that. So I wanted to also talk about what affirmative consent is not. Affirmative consent is not the absence of no. So just because your partner doesn't say no before or during a sexual act does not mean you have their consent. And that's kind of what I learned in high school. Nowadays, affirmative consent is, instead of no means no, which is what I learned when I was young, we say now yes means yes, because you only know if you have a yes if you hear the yes. You don't have a yes if you don't hear a no. There you go. So if you ask your partner to make out and then you go into heavy petting and then sex without asking if it was okay to escalate to those points, just because they don't stop you does not mean you had their consent to continue. Plus, it's super hot to stop mid-makeout and say to someone, I really want to fuck you. That's a super easy way to elicit someone saying, yes, I want that too. Let's do that now. Or any other thing that they could say, as long as it's a positive affirmative response. So any other answer besides a yes, a hell yes, or something like please do that, that's a no. So just that's what it is not. An affirmative consent is not a yes given while the person is incapacitated by drugs or alcohol. An intoxicated person cannot say yes. A person who is asleep cannot say yes. And a person who is unconscious cannot say yes. When both people are drunk, this is where other people tend to get confused. But if you are someone who often has sex while drunk or after drinking, which, let's be real, is most adults over 21, whoever is initiating the act is responsible for obtaining the consent. So if you're ever unsure if someone that you are canoodling with is too drunk to consent, then it's safer to assume it's a no. And the next time you guys hang out, you guys can probably make a plan to have a few less drinks before you have sex. Affirmative consent is not a coerced, I never say that word right, coerced or influenced yes. So if you're holding something over your partner, whether it's a gun to their head, a threat to their job, or something else, a manipulated yes is not a yes. So if you're having to tell your partner things like, if you loved me, you would blank, or I'll break up with you if you don't blank, or my past partners used to do blank, why don't you do blank, then you're using manipulation and their yes was forced on them. Affirmative consent is not constant. So giving consent once doesn't mean you give consent forever. It doesn't last, and it has to be given before and throughout the sexual act. Affirmative consent is not assumed. You can't assume consent by body language or appearance or nonverbal communication. A smile isn't consent. A sexy look is not consent. A sexy dress is not consent. I used to love when people would say that like a woman's outfit is asking for it because I would be like, well, if that's true, then wearing flammable clothing is asking to be set on fire, or wearing a bulletproof vest is asking to be shot. Wearing a short skirt is asking to be raped. Like, all of those things sound ridiculous, right? So no one is asking for anything unless they explicitly ask you with their words for something. Again, you can think of hunger just like if someone is walking down the street and their shirt says, I'm hungry, you as a logical person know that that shirt can't possibly be true for that person 100% of the time. There is going to be a point in that person's life, probably after a big meal, where that shirt is a lie. Sorry, my hair was going down my shirt. Because they're not always going to be hungry. So at some point, the I'm hungry is not going to be the truth. So just because someone is wearing something, or that might say to you, like, I'm attracted to them, and makes you want to engage in sexual acts with them, doesn't mean that they also want to do those things with you as well. Consent is not implied by past behavior, relationship status, or what someone is wearing, like I said, or where they are. So I think this is extra important because sexual violence often happens between people who know each other. It's not usually someone being attacked by a stranger in an alley. It's often between romantic partners, or someone the person knows. Married couple and people in committed relationships still need to give consent before they have sex. And just because you go into someone's bedroom does not mean you're consenting to have sex with them, even if you are alone. Like, that's not a yes. So you can go into a restaurant and not order a burger. So you can go into a room and you deserve the right to not have to have sex. So, yes, if someone has eaten a burger before, that doesn't mean they will want a burger again in their life, or all the time, or whenever you want them to have it. So, yes. Affirmative consent is not given by anyone who is under the legal age of 18. So the legal adult age in America is 18. I don't know about other countries, but that's usually the age where you are allowed to finally consent to sexual activity. So if you are over the age of 18 and you are having sex with someone under the age of 18, that is considered sexual assault because that person is legally not able to consent to that act. So just a heads up. It's also not consent from someone with a mental disability. And hopefully, I mean, I wish I didn't have to say that, but, you know, some people. So I also wanted to talk a little bit more about the term enthusiastic. Because at the beginning I said affirmative consent is the enthusiastic agreement to engage in sexual activity. So people often misinterpret the word enthusiastic as needing your partner to respond to your offer by like jumping up and down and shouting, yes, 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 from the top of their lungs like a crazy person. That's not what it means, but it does mean that your partner should be willing and eager and excited to do this sex thing with you. Their consent is not something that you should have to beat out of them or try and persuade them or convince them to give you. Making sure that you have enthusiastic consent just means you're checking in with your partner throughout the act and you're paying attention to them, their body language, what they're saying, how they behave. And it should be easy if you care about your partner's well-being and safety. If you want them to genuinely enjoy their sexual experience with you, and if you're a good-natured person, or just someone who doesn't want to hurt others, then caring about the people you interact with is normal. And it's a very vulnerable position that you both put yourselves in. So I don't know why you wouldn't want both people to be enjoying it. So affirmative consent. Why do we need to put all of this stuff in front of consent and define it so rigidly? Because sexual acts without consent is considered sexual assault. And if you don't want to be someone who sexually assaults people, if you want your partners to walk away from the experience feeling happy, confident, and physically and emotionally safe, then you should not sexually assault people. So it's good for you to know what consent is so that you can make sure you have it so that you are not assaulting people. We are all sexual beings, whether we have sex or we have never had sex. If we weren't sexual beings, then none of us would be here, because literally sexual just means reproducing with two people. And there's a reason why biologically we have a drive to have sex. But in modern society, everyone has a right to safe sex, to sexuality without violence, and to decide whether or not, when, and with who that they'll be sexual with. Affirmative consent protects both men and women because it's the person who is seeking or initiating the sex that is responsible for getting the consent, regardless of the gender. So there have been a lot of times where I have been the one initiating consent, and I'm one of those people who is a very blunt asker, just straight up, like, do you want to have sex with me? Because I don't know, like, that's just how I know for sure if someone does or doesn't. So if you want to gain affirmative consent from your partner and you don't want to assault anyone, then you should ask the partner. If they are legally capable to give you their consent, then you can ask them. But if they're under 18, they are intoxicated, or they don't have the mental capacity to consent legally, then don't ask them, don't do it. So yeah, the first step is obviously to ask them and to check the other person's body language while you're asking them, while you take the slow steps before escalating things. See if the person is enjoying it. Ask them if they like it. Be communicative with each other, because that's how you know whether or not the person is actually enjoying themselves. And then check with them at each time you start a new type of sexual activity, and on each occasion you start any sexual conduct. And look at their facial expressions and listen to what they're saying, because oftentimes if people aren't saying anything, it kind of makes it seem like they're just being passive and there's something they wish they could say but don't want to. If they seem unhappy or you are not sure if they're consenting, then take it as a no. So it's safer to say, well, she didn't say yes, so that's a no, than it is to say, well, she didn't say no, because let me tell you, that's not a yes. Or he or she didn't say no, because it can happen to anybody. I wanted to do a video that's more specific on sexual assault, and I will eventually, but the statistics on it are ridiculous. Like way too many people are being sexually assaulted. So this is why we want to talk about consent, because oftentimes people don't even know when they need to give consent. So, and and this is one of the things I'm going to go into a little bit fuzzier of a topic, but when is it okay for consent to be nonverbal? And I think that there is a time when nonverbal consent is still enthusiastic and freely given if you are with the partner you have experience with. So if you have done a lot of previous consensual acts, you guys have a rapport, you've like explored different sexual things with each other, you might be able to know this partner well enough to take their nonverbal cues. And there is still consent involved in this kind of relationship because, like I said, if you're in a relationship, you still need to get consent. But once you know somebody well enough to know if they are enjoying it, enthusiastically engaging in the sex, if they're receiving you, then you know that you have consent in that case. So this is not for people who meet at a party, at a bar. It's like their third or fifth time hooking up. These are for people who have a sexual career together, who know those kinds of what the state of consent looks for them. So if you know a person well enough to know when they're just being hangry, then you probably know them well enough to know if they were consenting or not. If you don't know a person that well, then I wouldn't try to do nonverbal consent because it's just dangerous. Okay, so consent is important to remember for people who also watch porn, because sometimes porn portrays situations where the female is manipulated or forced to do things that she seemingly doesn't want to do. But you have to remember that this is acting. This is not acting, I'm just me, sorry. But porn is acting. So those actors literally sign a contract that consents to everything that they do in the video. So they do consent, it's just before the cameras start rolling and before you actually see it. Because obviously signing a consent contract isn't as hot as the actual sex. And if you want to play scenes that you see in porn out in real life, that's super awesome and you're going to have a great time. But you also need to have your version of a consent contract, which is basically discussing with your partner out loud what you want to happen, don't want to happen, and what kinds of things like you're willing to try and what kinds of things you really don't want to happen at all, like don't even go there. And then you guys can agree to something that you both enthusiastically consent to. And also consider coming up with a safe word just in case they change their mind or something goes a little too far. So yeah, affirmative consent is super important to understand. The more that we talk about sex, the more comfortable we will be talking about consent with our partners. And affirmative consent is now, it's part of the laws, at least here in the United States, and especially here in California. But I didn't do too much research on the laws, but I went to a university, so I, was covered by this affirmative consent law. And so I did learn about it. And so like, I know that these laws, they don't dictate how you behave in sexual encounters. Obviously, they can't force you to get consent, but they do protect the people who are assaulted and the people whose consent is violated. These laws help have a clear definition of what consent is, because having that clear definition can also give you a definition of what sexual assault is, because it's the not having the consent. And they also protect initiators from engaging in non-consensual acts. So if you're someone who does often initiate sex, or you like to have sex with people, then these laws protect you from, being charged with sexual assault, because you know how to get the consent from the people you are having sex with. And you know that not securing consent puts you at fault for sexual assault. So you know when you are and when you're not breaking the law. And obviously most people don't want to break the law and hurt other people. And some people are just assholes, but most people are decent human beings and don't want to do that. Just like in marriages, there are laws that govern how they work, what a marriage is and what it isn't. So there are also laws that govern consent and what it is and what it isn't. But you as the person having sex and getting the consent, you get to choose how you obtain your consent and what you say, and like you can make it fun and sexy if you want to, and there are ways to do that. So you are fully allowed to have sex with whoever consents to having sex with you, however you guys consent to do it. And these laws give people the freedom to engage in all of these different kinds of sexual activities and enjoy it safely, because the people who are doing it are consenting. So I will end by saying all consensual sex is good sex. So if you have any more questions about consent, you can email me. My email is, I didn't even give my email at the top. So my email is positivepusslive@gmail.com. It's on my website. So if you go to my website, I'll have all of these resources I'm about to mention, plus my emails on there. So, but you guys should definitely check out, if you want more information and stuff, there's a Planned Parenthood information page on consent. And then there's this other really cool website, really good website called Consent is Everything. They have this little video at the very homepage about like comparing consent, asking someone if they want to have sex, to asking someone if they want a cup of tea. So it makes it really simple, and it's funny, and it makes sense. So I really liked that. And there was this other website, a Canadian website called yesmeansyes.com, and it has a lot of information about consent. And I'll be posting websites for parents as well. So there's a website called, or there's a company, I guess a firm, I don't know. It's called More Than Sex Ed, but it's in LA, and they do sex education, like workshops for kids and parents, and they have a lot of resources for parents who want to teach their kids about consent and make sure that their kids know, what consent is, and that will also protect them from having things done to them without their consent. And so if you have been assaulted and things have happened to you without your consent, and you're looking for resources or for people who can help you, there's a website called RAINN.com. It's RAINN.org. Sorry, not .com. It's the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization. And this is the phone number I gave at the top, but the link that I'm posting on my website is for the hotline. But on their actual website, there's a lot of information about assault and consent and all of the laws regarding that. So the phone number again was 1-800-656-4673, and it's totally confidential. They talk you through like what you should do, and they give you local resources, and they tell you about the laws in your area, so you can get individualized help. And you can also go to nsvrc.org. It's the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. They have resources for assault survivors as well. And if you're in California, there is the calcasa.org, the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And they also have resources for people who live in California who have been sexually assaulted and survived. So consent is super important, but I'm really glad that you guys stuck with me and heard everything I had to say about that. So yeah, the next time you go out there, definitely make sure you ask questions and get permission. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, I'll be happy to receive emails, tweets, comments, whatever, and reach out in whatever way you feel comfortable. Subscribe to my channel, check out my website, don't assault anyone, and stay sex positive. That's it for today. So I will see you pussies next week. I am me out of here.